This is Maple Blues.
Welcome back to Maple Blues, the podcast where we talk about the NHL, the St. Louis Blues, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and other things hockey. Once again, I'm Penguin Note.
And I'm Charlie ND.
Yes, it has been a while. I believe it was April, the last time we recorded a video, or I should say an episode, but we're back, finally. And of course, I think at first I should mention some of the few changes we've made, or I've made, to the branding. If you might have noticed, the Blues wordmark has changed, and we'll get to why we changed that. And among a few other things, we have a YouTube channel exclusively for this podcast. So I'm glad we got that. It's more centralized, and I'm leaning towards just having this podcast on YouTube only instead of Spotify. I feel more comfortable and more, or I guess I feel better just having it on YouTube. But that's just me.
Well, we still have a little bit to hash that out if we want. I think one of the benefits of Spotify is that people can listen like on the go, like when they're driving or whatever, which is something I typically like to do. Like when I'm on a long car ride, I like to throw on a podcast. So I would be in favor of having it available on Spotify, but that's just me.
You did bring up that point, so maybe I'll look into doing that as well. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what we have not been talking about. But first, I think one of the main reasons why we haven't been is in May, like only a week after that Blues game, my computer broke. So I was without a computer for about a month, which delayed some of the content on my channel. And afterwards, I kind of got busy between transitioning from high school to college, and I haven't been able to find time until now to record an episode. But thankfully, I am just done with my first semester of college, and I'm free right now. We might be, if both of our schedules work out, we could record more episodes in the next few months.
Yeah, that's right. As of right now, I'm on a break, so I don't go back till I believe January 12th, and then I have 7 weeks of class followed by a 1 week break in the first week of March, I believe. But it should be relatively light for me going forward, so with it being hockey season, that's definitely a plus.
Yeah, and speaking of hockey, let's talk about that Blues game. So I did actually make a video about why you should not and why you can't blame the Blues for giving up that tying goal. And if you actually go back and look at Game 7, and in particular the 4 Jets goals, you might have noticed that all of them were deflected shots, because the first Perfetti goal is just a perfect tip that went past Bennington's head that no one's going to stop. The second one, which I'd say the only real Jets goal that was actually a shot by the forward who scored, but that went off of Ryan Suter's stick. And then the third one, which I broke down, how Ehlers got lucky that when he whiffed the first time, it did not go out of the zone, because if that does, not only does Ehlers have to get the puck back, but all the Jets have to get out of the zone, and that would basically drain the clock and end the game. But when he did get it back, Kyle Connor was wide open for the perfect one-timer, or one-time pass, that sailed just past the blade of Justin Falk and found Perfetti once again for a tip with 1.6 seconds left. Although the tip came at 2.5, but the clock, once the puck was in, read 1.6. And then, of course, double overtime. I mean, I had a feeling, part of me had a feeling that once the Jets tied it, the Jets were going to win. But in double overtime, that Neil Pionk shot first went off Sundqvist, then it hit Adam Lowry, went in. That was a heartbreaking end to a series that the Blues were the better team, and they could have and technically should have won. They should have won that series, but if they just did not get the bounces and they couldn't score on an empty net goal, which is one of the problems they're having right now. And of course, they were without Dylan Holloway. So honestly, that felt like my version of 4-1 for any of the Leafs fans like Charlie, who had to experience that. I just hope the Blues can recover from that. But yeah, that was painful.
I just gotta say here, as a neutral fan, that series was insane. Now, first of all, there are a lot of parallels between that series and the Leafs versus Bruins series in 2013. You know, the Leafs were facing a team that they were heavily favored to lose against, and they were down by multiple games and against all odds forced a game 7 and then blew a lead in said game 7 in improbable fashion. But I just gotta say here, as a fan of neither of these teams, I have never been so floored by a team getting eliminated in overtime. That obviously is not a team that I don't cheer for. Because if you guys remember from the last episode we did, I very confidently predicted the Blues would knock off the President's Trophy winning Jets in 7 games. And in game 7, I was on cloud 9. I was feeling so good about myself. I was like, I told you guys, Blues in 7. The Blues are going to upset those President's Trophy winning Jets. And I was feeling so good. Like, I thought I was the smartest hockey fan on planet Earth for predicting this. And then it all fell apart. And when that tying goal went in, my jaw was on the floor. I could not believe what I was seeing. And during overtime, I was definitely stressed. Not nearly as stressed as I would be if my team was involved. But sometimes, like, in sports, you can sort of just tell when it's a team's destiny to win, you know? Almost like it's written in a story. You could just see it coming. And unfortunately, the Jets did, in fact, get it done. I was really pulling for the Blues. I thought it would have been such a great underdog story. And I just want to say, no disrespect to, like, the Jets or their fans or anything, but, like, this team was never going to win the cup, okay? Like, they could not win a single road game in the entire playoffs, which technically they don't need to because they're the President's Trophy winners, but still, they couldn't win a single game on the road. And, like, they had a Vezina-winning goalie, and a goalie that's generally just been great for his entire career, and they almost lost to the second wildcard team. Like, that should have been a big hint that this team was never going to hoist a cup, at least not in 2025. But, you know, at the end of the day, it was a great series all around, and I'm sure for all the fans in the crowd during Game 7, it must have been like one of the greatest moments, or one of the greatest sports moments they're ever going to have in their lives. So, you know, I'm happy for them in that regard, but at the end of the day, I was just relieved that I don't cheer for either of these teams, and I didn't have to go through the stress of watching this series, because the series my team was involved in was stressful enough. I could not have imagined my team being involved in a game 7 like this. That was just absolutely insane. And yeah, I was sad when the Blues got eliminated. I really thought they were going to get it done, but, you know, the hockey gods are cruel sometimes.
Yeah, and honestly, that series was winnable. There were game 1, the Blues, if I'm not mistaken, had a 3-2 lead at one point, and they allowed 3 straight and lost. Game 2 was a goaltending battle, and that I would say is the only real game that Hellebuck was good in, and Hellebuck was just better than Binnington. If the Blues got enough offense and stole Game 2, then they'd probably win this series. Or if they have Dylan Holloway, they have more offense, and they do definitely steal Game 2. And Game 5 on the road just got out of hand. I was at Game 6, and I could tell that was not the same Hellebuck in the regular season. I think partly Hellebuck wasn't doing so well because he was running to the ground during the regular season, was used way too much and did not have as much rest as other goalies. But honestly, that series was winnable. But at least for the Blues fan and me, I'm at least happy that the Jets got eliminated in the second round. So the Blues fans can always just say, hey, when we beat the Jets, we went to the Stanley Cup final and won. The Jets, they got knocked off in the second round. So at least there's that. It's the petty victories that matter most.
I gotta ask, as a Blues fan, do you hate the Jets, or like do you have any like animosity as towards the Jets as a team after that series?
I had hated the Jets way before that series, so there was already bad blood. There was bad blood from before the 2019 series. There was bad blood during that series. The Jets, I've pretty much hated the Jets since middle school. And honestly, it would make sense since they're a division rival. And honestly, when the Blues more bigger rivals in the past 7 years. So yeah, I've hated the Jets, and I probably will hate, and I hate them more because of it. And especially since I feel like, and this is not me being like, oh, they got lucky. They actually did get lucky since all four of those goals came off of bounds, while the Blues scored what the traditionalists would call clean goals, or I'd say, or at least two of them were. Well, Tyro's was a tap in, but he didn't have to get a bounce off of other things, other sticks or legs. So, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. And I feel like I've sort of been like on the other side of that, to be honest. Like, I've had situations where my team has been outplayed, but they won because of lucky bounces. And I think 2023, that first round series, Leafs versus Lightning, I think the Lightning were the better team in 5 of 6 games. The Leafs had absolutely no business winning that series, but they somehow got it done because they found Vasilevsky's weakness, which is shots from the point, apparently. And so many of the goals in that series were just wild shots from the point that took a bunch of crazy deflections and pinballed in. And the Leafs somehow managed to win the series by doing that. Hockey makes no sense to me. I don't know. We had no business winning that, but we somehow did. So I've been on the opposite side of what you're feeling right now. And, it's crazy. The reason I bring it up is because when you win like that, it feels less satisfying. But when you lose like that, it feels way more frustrating, if that makes sense.
And honestly, looking back at that, I feel like the Leafs also won because the Lightning were fatigued from playing in 3 straight cup finals the year before, and 200. If you combine the regular seasons in the 2 years prior to that series and the playoffs, the Lightning, if I'm not mistaken, had played 200 total games, so their players were probably fatigued going to that series. But it's a good comparison between the two.
Yeah, but I think when everything's considered, this is probably the craziest series of the entire playoffs last year, which isn't so fresh in my mind anymore. I'm just trying to think back, but just going off of what I remember, I think this series is definitely the one from 2025 that stands out the most for me. And it's going to be one that's continued to talk about. It's going to be one that we continue to talk about like decades from now. So it was definitely something to watch, and it's unfortunate your team was on the wrong side of it.
Yeah, and especially they'll talk about it if the Blues and Jets meet in the playoffs again throughout the years. And I'd say if we compare all those series in last playoffs, I feel like that Blues Jets series was the best series, and I guess the next two would be Stars Avalanche in the first round. And then I want to say third would be that Panthers Maple Leaf series in round two.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is that series. So, I guess I'll get started talking about that. So, from my perspective, we had just gotten off a very, very stressful series against the Ottawa Senators. And I knew that series was going to be stressful going into it. Ultimately, the Leafs won, which I think is what most people thought was going to happen. That's not to discredit the Ottawa Senators or anything, because they're a talented team, but ultimately the Leafs had the skill and the goaltending needed to push them over the edge. The Sens did make it close, but now the Leafs were moving on, and they were facing the Florida Panthers again. And this is going to make me sound like a bad fan, but before the series started, I predicted the Panthers to win. And the reason I thought that was because the Panthers, it's important to remember, they were leading the division for most of last season. And then down the stretch, there were injuries and suspensions, but I knew not to discredit them. I knew that they knew how to turn it on come playoffs time, and I was worried about this series. I thought that, this could be the end for the Leafs if things don't go well and if they're not careful. And yeah, so I predicted them to lose. I wanted them to win, obviously, but I just did not have a good feeling. And paradoxically, going into game 1 of the series, I felt confident. I felt like the Leafs were going to win that game. Not the whole series, but that specific game. I've never been so not nervous about a playoffs game in my life as game 1 of the second round last year. And sure enough, the Leafs put on a great performance. They scored a lot of goals. The Panthers did make it close, but the most notable thing to come from that game was that Anthony Stolarz got pretty badly concussed, and he was throwing up on the bench, and it was just not a good sight. And that led to Joseph Woll having to take over for the rest of the series. And I wasn't too worried, to be honest. Like, obviously I care about Stolarz's health, like, you know, from a human standpoint. Like, obviously I want him to be healthy. But, you know, Woll, I think, was just as competent of a goaltender, and I wasn't really worried about the goaltending change. Anyways, game 2, Woll was great, like I thought he would be. And even though the Leafs were up 2-0, I was not confident at all still. I thought, okay, the series is shifting to Sunrise, to a building the Leafs have not been able to win in as of late. And going into game 3, the Leafs were up 3-1, and they ended up losing in overtime in that game. The Panthers did eventually end up tying it up. That game went to overtime, and the Leafs lost. But that game in particular, there was a Morgan Rielly own goal in that game. If Morgan Rielly was just not in that place to deflect the puck into the net, I believe that was the moment that prevented the Leafs from winning the Stanley Cup. That one singular moment. But anyways, the Panthers also took game 4. And one thing I want to note about the Panthers and just watching them is that their penalty kill is outrageous. There are two types of hockey fans, right? There are the ones that like go off of stats and things they read on websites and stuff like that to assess a team. And then there's another that just assesses a team by watching them. And I'm definitely in the latter group. And what I saw from the Florida Panthers is a penalty kill that's unlike anything I've ever seen. They were better shorthanded than they were 5-on-5. Like, the Leafs could not enter the offensive zone when the Panthers were on the penalty kill. I could not believe what I was seeing. I'm like, wow. And I think at that moment when I realized that, during like game 3 or game 4, I started to think this Panthers team might be this decade's Chicago Blackhawks. Like, I genuinely thought, like, this is the next juggernaut team, just by watching them play. Anyways, game 5 comes around, and the Leafs just lay an egg on home ice. Like, just horrendous showing. And game 6, I was actually not at home for game 6 or 7. I was in Washington State because I was going to see a concert, but I was talking to some of my friends in a Leafs-oriented group chat we have, and I said to the guys in the group chat, I bet the Leafs are going to get a fluky win in game 6 and then lay an egg in game 7. And game 6, sure enough, despite all the momentum being against the Leafs and the Leafs playing on the road, the Leafs somehow pulled out a victory in Sunrise. And Austin Matthews, who had been in a scoring drought, he got one on the board, which is great for him to get the monkey off his back. And game 7, honestly, like, at this point, I wasn't even worried about it because I had a feeling they were going to lose. Like, I just had this sinking feeling. And for me, I was not at my hotel room. It was the day after the concert I went to, so I was just basically, like, exploring Seattle and, like, the surrounding areas, and I was in areas where, like, I didn't have Wi-Fi most of the time, so I was just intermittently looking at the score. And I happened to be at Climate Pledge Arena, home of the Seattle Kraken, and I was using their Wi-Fi to look at the score, and I saw it was 2-0. I'm like, yeah, they're gonna lose. Like at this point, I had accepted it. They always do this. Like they are such a predictable team. I knew they were gonna somehow get a win in Game 6 and then lay an egg in Game 7. I don't know why, but there's just something mentally about the Leafs. They just get like, I don't know, it's like they lose confidence in their abilities and things just fall apart. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to turn my phone off, go back to exploring, and we'll see what happens. And, I spent the rest of the day just walking around, not really thinking that much about the game, if I'm being honest. And I looked back at my phone. I thought, okay, they probably lost. Let's see what the damage is. I thought it was going to be like maybe, I don't know, 4-3 at overtime. No, 6-1. 6-1. Like, I was right, but I wasn't expecting to be that right. I messaged the group chat. I was like, what the hell happened? Did they just stop trying? And everyone was like, yeah. And this signified something much bigger than just the game or the series. Everyone basically unanimously knew that this was going to be Mitch Marner's final game as a Maple Leaf. And I actually made a more in-depth video about that topic on my channel if you guys want to check that out. But this was definitely an end of an era game. And at the time, I wasn't that upset because I was like, wow, this is the furthest the Leafs have ever gone in the playoffs in my lifetime. It's a new milestone. But, like, everyone else around me was so depressed, and I didn't really know why. But, a few months later, it started to dawn on me, like, wow, like, this might have been the Leafs' best shot at winning a Stanley Cup, and they squandered it. And I don't want to discredit the Florida Panthers, because I think they're a very skilled team, and I think they deserve those 2 Stanley Cups that they won. But it just looked like the Leafs they just stopped trying. I don't know how else to word it. It just seemed like they got down on themselves and it was just a perpetual cycle of depression. And the fans started getting so upset during the last few minutes of the game, and understandably so. Like, beer was being thrown on the ice, jerseys were being thrown on the ice, like, everything was collapsing. It was like seeing an empire fall. And I don't blame the fans for being upset because Leafs tickets are expensive. Leafs playoffs tickets are outrageously expensive. So, when you have an alcohol-fueled crowd who just spent so much of their money to see their favorite team in the playoffs only for that to happen, like, I can understand how they would be upset. And, yeah, I just had a very delayed reaction for, like, the sadness of that game. Like, the full disappointment didn't hit for me until a few months later. And, yeah, I made that video discussing Marner's departure. And, I'm glad it was, like, the silver lining is that we lost to the Panthers and not, like, a team that I seriously hate, like the Habs or the Sens, but it still hurt, There was so much hope in the fan base's eyes. Like, especially Game 1, Game 2, like, there was so much joy in the city seeing the team go on a deep-ish run. And I genuinely believe if the Leafs had won that series, if Morgan Rielly had not scored that own goal in Game 3, the Leafs would have won the Cup last year. And I have no idea if they're ever going to get that close anytime in the future. And, yeah, it kind of sucks. Looking back at it, I just wish they could have given the fans something to cheer for in Games 4 and 5, even if they lost. It was a disappointing end to a season that showed a lot of promise. And ultimately, to end things off on my tangent, I was right. I was right about the Panthers winning the series. I was right to be nervous. I was right to be skeptical. And, obviously, like, congratulations to them. But, it really is a shame looking back at it.
Yeah, that series was brutal for Leafs fans. Honestly, the first round, part of me thought they were going to sweep the Senators, at least when they were up 3-0. And then when the Senators won Game 4 and 5, I thought, oh my God, are the Leafs going to get reverse swept? But they didn't. And I feel like it's not really Joseph Woll's fault when the offense disappeared in Game 4, 5, and 7. And honestly, if it weren't for Joseph Woll playing out his mind in Game 6, the Panthers ended in 6. But yeah, I just feel like honestly, the Leafs have to be cursed. Harold Ballard had to have done something after 1967 that pissed off the hockey gods. Either that or you just got to say, this is the year, this is the year, this is the year, and have no negative thoughts whatsoever. And maybe they'll win the cup on accident or at least make the finals.
Yeah, honestly, something I've never understood is how so many Leafs fans are able to like stay optimistic. Because it's like, do you even watch the team? Like, do you even watch the games? Because, like, the fact that I was able to predict that the Leafs would win Game 7, or lose Game 7 and win Game 6, it's just so indicative of how predictable this team is. Like, I know how this team functions, okay? I know what's up with it. I just don't understand how people are able to stay so optimistic about this team, and I think it's embarrassing, honestly. I think it's embarrassing when people say, like, it's our year, and they prematurely celebrate. It's probably my least favorite thing about Leafs fans in general, and I think it makes all of us look bad, and I just don't like that. I'm all for, like, being cautiously optimistic, but I just don't know how you could be so overconfident about the Leafs. It's just unbelievable. And now we're seeing them kind of struggle this year, and yeah, it's like, where was all this optimism coming from, you know?
It's that big market bias, honestly. It's why the media doesn't really take the Blues seriously, but they always hype up the Leafs and the Rangers and the Blackhawks and the Kings sometimes. It's that big market bias, and especially the Canadian big market bias, where Leafs net honestly jams into everyone's ear that this is the year the Leafs win the cup. But
Oh
yes,
yeah.
St. Louis does not have that kind of pressure being in a big market. But yeah, I just feel like the Leafs might just be cursed. They're honestly cursed. It might just be like a Cubs thing where pick one year is going to be the year it will happen.
Yeah, but honestly, saying that they're cursed like the Cubs is a little bit reassuring, because at least the Cubs curse ended, you know? It took a long time, but like, their fans eventually did get rewarded with a World Series win. And you know, we're nowhere near the Cubs levels of droughts quite yet, but it's starting to get pretty concerning, to say the least. Like, if the Leafs don't win a cup by the end of this decade, it's going to be like, okay, what's going on here? But, you know, I think since I was born, I think only 14 teams have won the Stanley Cup. Like 14 to 16. Somewhere around there. I don't really know, but, you know, it's some reassurance to know that we're not suffering alone, at least.
I mean, you could be Buffalo and not even sniff the postseason, so there's always that.
Yeah, exactly. Could be worse.
Or even worse, be in Dave Nonis land of throwing money at anything and everyone that breathes.
Oh yeah. But yeah, to go back to what you said about big market bias, like, yeah, I hate that. I don't like the sports landscape here in Canada at all, if I'm being honest, which is something we could go more in depth about in a future episode. But like, yeah, the Leafs and also the Oilers get like shoved down people's throats a lot. Like,
And the Canadians sometimes
no,
when
but
they're
that's the
good.
thing.
If I'm
That's the thing, though. Like, generally, the Oilers are, like, more talked about in the Canadian media than the Habs are, surprisingly. Which is, like, so weird. Like, the Oilers have more out of market games televised on national TV than, like, the other Canadian teams do. And I know, like, obviously they have McDavid and everything, so that's a big factor, but it's like, the Oilers are really, like they're present in Sportsnet's marketing like everywhere, and so are the Leafs. But it really does surprise me to see like the Oilers so like talked about like more than the Habs. Like, that's really surprising to me. Like, obviously, in the French media, it's different, but, like, yeah, the Leafs and the Oilers definitely get, like, the most overhype by the Canadian media. And it's like, when they're good, it's like, yeah, like, there's no doubt they're going to win the cup. Or when they're bad, it's like the big story, which, maybe some people like that attention. Maybe some people like cheering for underdog small market teams more. Personally, I'm indifferent. I'm just going to cheer for who I cheer for. And if my team gets more or less press coverage, then, so be it.
Yeah, that honestly is a video for another day. And I think this is a good way to transition to the off season. I'd say first let's talk about Utah, the Mammoth. I still remember that exact day because it was a few weeks after the Blues were eliminated. I was in school and I was in, we called it advisory. It was kind of like homeroom. So that one day I'm just on my computer and I randomly go on the NHL website. And that's when I saw that Utah unveiled their new branding, and it was the Mammoth, which was kind of obvious since it leaked on their YouTube channel. I honestly like it. I like the logo and the hidden symbolism. I did go into detail in my video where I talked about some of the recent NHL rebrands. I personally like the Mammoth. I would have liked the Yeti, but I feel like they did a good job with the Mammoth.
Yeah, I was personally hoping they would go with the name Outlaws, but now that I think about it, I think Mammoth sort of rolls off the tongue better than Outlaws would have. And let me just say, I think they cooked with this logo. Like, this logo's clean. It looks absolutely beautiful. I love the colors. I think just the line work looks outstanding. I love all the hidden details. I love, like, the mountains merging in with the mammoth head. I think it's just fantastically done. I think it looks great on the jersey. Although, if I'm being honest, I kind of wish they went with blue home jerseys, because black is sort of like overused and most people consider like blue, like they associate blue with the mammoth more, if that makes sense. So I think a blue jersey would have been good, just to like, a powder blue to set it apart from all the black jerseys in the league. But the black still looks great, don't get me wrong. Like, I would have loved to have them like have a black jersey and a blue jersey. And I also wish they went with putting the mammoth head logo on the white jersey as well.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah. I complained about that and it still annoys me. I honestly just hope they complain so much that Ryan Smith and company make the change next year and make I guess they call it what was it, mountain blue? Hopefully they just save that Utah jersey for a mountain blue third jersey, or save it for the potential stadium series that Utah is eventually going to get, from what I've overheard from some sources. But yeah, I don't know why they had to put Utah on the front when we already suffered through that with year one. But yeah.
They did make a subtle change to the font, but honestly, like they needed to put the mammoth head on it and not just on the shoulder patch. The only changes I would make: put the mammoth head on the white jersey, like I said, and also have a blue jersey as their home and keep the black as an alt, because I think the black looks good, but I think the blue should be the most prominent thing in their branding, in my opinion anyways. And I like Ryan Smith as an owner. I think he listens to the fans, which is great. And, having team owners like take into account fan input and just like wanting the best for the fan experience, the game day experience, that's great. That's very refreshing to see in the NHL. And some other things to note about this team: during the offseason, they put a lot of renovations into Delta Center, which is where they play, and it has some of the steepest lower bowl seating you will see probably in the entire NHL, to be honest. And obviously this is important considering that they're going to be hosting the Olympics next decade. But, just making the necessary upgrades to their arena to get rid of those awful sight lines. There are still some not great ones, but it's definitely better than it was last season with like the big walls behind the nets. And also, the Mammoth unveiled their mascot, who is a blue mammoth named Tusky. And I think this is the obvious choice for a mascot. I think it looks great. Another great addition to the NHL's roster of mascots. And the NHL has a lot of good mascots. So, yeah, I was very happy when Tusky got unveiled. I like his design. I think he looks cool. He looks cute and intimidating at the same time, which, strikes a good balance. But yeah, so far I think in this team's very brief existence, they are making a lot of great moves, both like on the ice and off the ice. And they actually got out to a pretty decent start this year, although they have fallen back a bit. They're tied for the last wildcard spot with the San Jose Sharks, and honestly, I think they're a team that controls their own destiny. They very well could contend for a playoff spot this year, and we'll see what happens with them. We're already seeing lots of improvement over their previous iteration as the Coyotes, even though I know technically they're a different franchise from the Coyotes, but they're doing a lot to elevate the roster that they inherited from them.
Yeah, and we can talk about the Central Division at the very end because of that trade that just happened the day we're recording it today, which we'll get to eventually. And also in the Central Division, let's talk about my team, the Blues, and their rebrand. So this rebrand, I was among many fans that were hoping the Blues would rebrand to their 1967 uniforms. And they had been using the old royal blue and navy blue since 1997. That uniform and the logos and uniforms were created to replace the red striped jersey after Mike Keenan was head coach, and it was mainly to get the fans back and to eliminate the red, because red and the Blues should never have mixed in the first place. Even though that third jersey is nice, not third jersey, the red striped jersey is nice. It should not be their permanent look. But yeah, Royal and Navy was their look for 27 years, including that Cup win in 2019. And now the rebrand's here. I like most of it. I do have a few gripes. I'm off and on about the home jersey not having a white outline, mainly because the Blues have been using graphics, which I'll get to in a bit. They've been using yellow more for their backgrounds, and they even have from street banners to digital graphics to even marketing graphics. The Blues have been using a yellow background for the note. I know it makes the logo pop more, but that's not the main color of their jersey. It's Nashville who has a yellow home jersey. Yellow has never been our primary color and never will be, so I don't like why they're using yellow that much. But besides that, I do like both uniforms. I like the set of alternate logos as well, with the STL treble clef, the fleur-de-lis treble clef, the river music, even the record roundel, which a lot of people may not notice or know of. But personally, I like the rebrand, and I have a feeling a new third jersey could be on the way. And I also, allegedly, Fanatics is making NHL City Edition uniforms that will be revealed next year, is what a source said on Twitter. I don't know how legit it is, but that's something to keep an eye on. So I love the Blues rebrand, except for my few main gripes. Besides that, it's amazing. I can't wait to get my hands on some jerseys.
Yeah, I gotta say, generally speaking, I'm a fan of this rebrand. So basically, they took the heritage note and they tweaked it a bit. They added a blue outline around it. They made some of the lines thicker. And I think it makes for a very classy look. I'm not a huge fan of the numbering on the back of the away jersey. I would have liked to see them do something with the outlines of the numbers, put yellow around it. But I think it's a great look. The thing is, though, I liked the Blues navy look that they used to have, the navy note. I like the shape of the new logo better. Like, when you look at the old one, it kind of looks like goofy and bulbous looking back at it, whereas like the new one's like more classy. But I loved the navy and blue, and the navy blue and yellow looked so great together. And I wish they found a way to like incorporate that somehow. But I think the new fonts they've been using are fantastic. They look so classy. I love the Fleur de Lis logo, the STL logo, the River Music logo. They look fantastic. And I love the details on the inside of the collar. Like, that is just amazing. I am a very big fan of this rebrand. I think it's a good direction for this team. You talked a bit about, how the NHL is going to do something similar to like a city edition jersey, sort of similar to what the NBA does. I want to know from you, what would you like to see on a city edition Blues jersey? Like, what type of colors would you like to see, or like what direction do you want the team to go in?
Honestly, whatever they do, as long as it is not a yellow or red base. The red jersey, that was awful, and they didn't win a game wearing that. And the yellow jersey, that gives me throwbacks to that 22-23 season, which was awful. So, and if they're doing a city connection, I fear it could be a red base since the St. Louis flag is red. But if we're going off what I want the Blues to do an all blue jersey and use 3 shades of blue: navy blue, the light blue, which I call heritage blue, and put baby blue, which is synonymous with the Cardinals, but has never been used in a Blues jersey before. So use those 3 shades and find a way to incorporate the Fleur de Lis. Honestly, just use some of the logos from the Blues brand, like the STL and the Fleur de Lis, and even the River Music. All 3 of those can be put on a jersey, and even use the river stripe in the St. Louis flag. I did make actually a concept with that near exact design, so I may post that on Instagram someday. But honestly, that's what I would do: an all navy blue base, similar to that Arch jersey, which fans love, and those 3 shades of blue. Honestly, now that I think about it, that could possibly, potentially be what they do. They do some sort of throwback to the Arch jersey, which is almost 10 years old, as weird as that sounds, or not 10 years old, 20 years old. But yeah, I feel like what the Blues should do is 3 shades of blue or an Arch throwback. And how about a jersey without yellow for the first time ever? Just try something different.
I think I like that idea. Using the Fleur would be nice, because I noticed that like when you changed your YouTube profile picture to get rid of the yellow in it, I thought that looked so classy. I thought that was amazing. I definitely love your current look. I think you made a very good decision, like changing the yellow to white. And I think if the Blues do something similar to what you did, it'll be a slam dunk. That is something they need to pursue.
And honestly, just not even white letters in the jersey, just all blue. And also, in terms of the jersey, have the new ragtime font be the jersey font for the jersey, because the home and away do not use the ragtime font. They use the classic 67 font. So they could use that ragtime font as well for the jerseys and numbers, and I think it would look awesome. But also, yeah, just use 3 shades of blue, no yellow, no white, no red. Try 3 shades of blue, maybe throw in the Arch somewhere, and maybe even put a cool design in the collar. That's what I think they would do. So what would the Leafs do, since they kind of have done some sort of Toronto throwbacks before? They've done arenas throwbacks. They had that Justin Bieber jersey that flips in and out. And of course, they've done St. Pat's throwbacks. So what else can they do if they were to do a Toronto Maple Leaf City Edition jersey?
That's a good question. Well, I've thought about this a bit. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but when you ask someone what the Leafs' secondary color is, most people will say, oh, it's white. That's technically not true. The Leafs' secondary color is actually silver, and no one would blame you if you didn't know that, because it rarely appears in their branding. But I have their Centennial Classic jersey on screen right now, and as you can see, the veins on the leaf are silver on it, and there's silver striping on it. So I would like to see the Leafs incorporate silver a bit more because it rarely makes an appearance in their branding. It's probably still going to be like the same navy blue because they've already done a black third jersey, which I own. It's sitting in my closet right now. And obviously they're not going to go green because that's a St. Pat's thing. So maybe they could go with like a darker shade of blue, like maybe closer to like a navy with like, I would just like to see them incorporate silver somehow. Like if they don't, it's not a big deal, but it would be cool if it makes an appearance because I think the silver on the veins of the leaf makes for a very classy look. And if we're talking about like specifically connections with the city, they're probably going to find a way to like shove the CN Tower onto the design somehow. The Blue Jays did that with their City Connect uniforms, which I also own, and it's my favorite jersey that the Blue Jays use. So I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to like put in some sort of iconography like that on the jersey somewhere. But who knows? I think the Leafs and like the original 6 teams in general prefer to play it safe, but this is a good opportunity to experiment with something new. And the third jersey they introduced, a lot of people didn't like it at first, but, it grew on the fan base, and it's definitely a jersey that I'm proud to have in my collection. And I would just like to see them experiment, essentially. Like, I don't know what to expect. They could go in so many different directions, but we'll see. I'm excited to see that. I love when, we have a league-wide jersey program. That's always so fun to like compare and contrast what teams do. So I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, hopefully this is real. I have a feeling it is. I'm glad that all 32 teams are, because not like in baseball where 2 teams still have not had a City Connect jersey. Guess who? But yeah, it's always fun when all 32 teams get jerseys in a league-wide program, especially with the new wave of alternate jerseys where almost everyone has an alternate jersey except for Montreal, Nashville, and I think Anaheim, because I would say Florida, but they're getting their Winter Classic jersey technically could be this year's alternates. So I'm excited to see what every team does, and hopefully certain teams like Detroit actually try to do something fun for once. Yeah, I feel like also the Maple Leafs could try a baby blue jersey in some way if silver is not an option. I feel like with silver, they might just try to jam it will be a cheap excuse to bring up the cup wins, which then everyone mentions, 1967, you haven't won a cup since 1967. I feel like that silver might just be a cheap excuse to bring up the cup wins. I feel like a baby blue Leafs jersey could work. I was going to say maybe because they could do red, but then the Canadians and Senators, it would just feel weird. A red Maple Leafs jersey, even though the Leafs at one point did have red letters in their logo a very, very long time ago. But yeah, I'm excited to see what happens in this potential City Edition NHL series. And I guess since we're talking about rebrands, let's briefly talk about Boston. Bruins rebrand. I like it as well. I don't like it as much as the Blues rebrand, but I feel like they simplified the look, combined logos from the past, and have a new secondary mark that changes words. And I think it's really nice.
I am a big fan of this Bruins rebrand, to be honest. I like that they have a different logo for their home and away jerseys. And I think when you compare it to the old one kind of looks busier, if that makes sense. Like more muddled. And these new ones, while they keep the same like B shape, which I'm a huge fan of, it looks a lot less busy and more clear. And I think they knocked this one out of the park. And I like that they got rid of like the yellow shoulders on the home jersey. I was never a huge fan of those yellow shoulders. I think the yellow around the neck looks good, but just having black shoulders with all the striping being where the yellow is, I think that was the way to go. So to keep things brief, good job, Bruins.
Yeah, I got to see both jerseys live on Tuesday. I went with one of my friends from college who had never been to a Blues game. And yeah, seeing both of those jerseys live was real nice. It was a both rebrands were good by both teams. I wish the Bruins. My one real complaint is that I wish the Bruins would have the Bear logo on both shoulders and not just the one. Although I have a feeling it has something to do with the sponsorships and any future anniversary patches, which is why the Bruins don't have it on both shoulders and why the Blues don't have a logo on either shoulder because they do have a theme ticket jersey with the Fleur de Lis logo on both shoulders. It made me wonder why they didn't put any of the either the Fleur de Lis or the STL or even the record on the shoulders, which I thought would have looked really nice. But Blues have traditionally never had secondary marks except for that the 90s jersey with the trumpet and the Arch jersey, which had the Navy note.
Right. So we've talked a lot about branding here in the future, but I want to sort of shift gears here and talk about the present. And something you wanted to talk about was actually our team's struggles on the ice. And yeah, it's not been great for either of our teams thus far. Do you want to talk about the Blues' struggles?
Yes, so when I'm recording this, they actually beat the Blackhawks tonight 3-2. Of course, they have not made it close in any of the games they have won this year. Most of them have to be a one-goal victory for some reason. And the Blues have trouble scoring goals. They have troubles keeping the puck out of the net. Binnington and Hofer both had not good seasons, and it's mainly that defense. I don't know why this team traded Zach Bolduc for Logan Mailloux when he sucked in Montreal most of the time. But he did score tonight, so maybe he'll start a streak. Who knows? Uh, Honestly, some decisions do fall on Jim Montgomery for being a bit too conservative when the Blues have the lead. They'll have like a 1 or 2 goal lead, and they'll decide just sit on it. You don't need to add to the lead. If it hasn't worked, then if it hasn't worked 9 times out of 10 this time, I feel like that Montgomery will change up the lines, but not form any real chemistry. Part of me feels like they're just trying to they're repeating Major League Two, where the team struggles again, then goes on a hot streak. It wouldn't be ironic. Also, I'm curious, is Jobu still in the locker room? Because if he's not in the locker room, it makes total sense why they've been struggling. It can't be the rebrand. I know people are going to say, oh, it's the rebrand. That makes no sense. It is not the rebrand that is causing these problems. I'm just hoping, just like when I said in the very first episode, I believe I said I was hopeful the Blues would go on a second half, or maybe it was the first episode or the second or the third, but either way, I said I was hopeful the Blues would go on a second half run post Four Nations, and I'm gonna keep being optimistic. Although I prefer for them to go on a hot streak right now and not have to wait post Olympics because after the Olympics, there is not much margin for error. There's only 2 games in February, and then you have like, I believe the trade deadline is the week after. Yeah, I believe the trade deadline is Friday, March 6th, and NHL hockey resumes on the 27th or the 28th of February. So there is not much margin for error. So if the Blues are going to get their game together, they have to get back now. And I'm hopeful. And of course, the team is injured because what's a struggling team without some injuries? And they've had to call a bunch of people from their minor league team in Springfield and bring back Robbie Fabry. So hopefully, this win against Chicago starts something good, and the Blues can pull it together and get their heads out of the sand and get back in the playoff hunt. And it's honestly weird that the Blues are only, as of the time I'm recording this, they're only 2 points out of a playoff spot. So hypothetically, if they go on a winning streak, they are in a playoff spot for Christmas, which is absolutely shocking, even though it is still technically early. But I feel like the problems with the Blues are simple. They don't score, They can't keep the puck out of their net. The goaltending can't bail them out. Some clueless coaching decisions and injuries. And there's probably one or two more things I'm missing, but it's a culmination of all those issues plus more. I honestly don't know. Or I have another hunch, which may sound weird, but in the 2017-18 season, the 22-23 season, and the 23-24 season, the Blues finished the season on the road against a division rival. And in all three of those seasons, they missed the playoffs. And this year, they are scheduled to finish the season on the road in Utah, who is a division rival. So I don't know if there's some sort of curse or weird coincidence, but maybe the Blues can buck the trend, or something happens with the Olympic Arena in Milan and the schedule gets jangled up, and the Blues eventually either finish the season on the road against someone not from the Central, or they finish the season at home, because they've since 2011-12, the Blues have never missed the playoffs when they finish the season at home. I don't know what it is. Maybe the Blues just love finishing the season at home or something, but it's just a weird coincidence. So yeah, that's me talking about why I think the Blues are struggling right now. Hopefully, and I'm going to be optimistic, they, just like last year, they get it together, hopefully sooner than last year, and this time they actually win a playoff series. Of course, making the playoffs would be lucky enough, but I'm hopeful they can make the playoffs and get it together.
Well, I'll just say this. The Blues are a team that's no stranger to these early season struggles. It's not too late for them, They could go on another 12 game win streak, although that's unlikely, but they still have a lot of time to get it together, so we'll definitely see where they are a few weeks down the line and see what's changed. I'll tell you what though, it's not going to be easy for them to get back into it when, they play in a division with like the Avalanche, who already have 51 points. We're not even halfway through December and they're already at the 51 point mark. They could
And they
very
have
well
only two, and they only have two regulation losses. That baffles me, but it's going to be very exciting when we hope they get eliminated in the first round by probably the second wild card in the West. It would be very hilarious if the Avalanche win the President's Trophy and the Blues are once again the second wild card. And I hope the Blues could knock off the Avalanche in that scenario, because the Blues have never beaten a President's Trophy winner in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. I know when twice as a wild card twice they have faced the President's Trophy in the first round and lost. I wonder, if that were to happen, that would be hilarious, and I feel like a lot of people would root for the Blues to beat the Avalanche for that massive upset. Because honestly, part of me feels like the Avalanche are the 19 Lightning and 23 Bruins again, where, oh, they have this great regular season and then they absolutely flame out in the playoffs. That's what I feel like the Avalanche could be. And since we're talking about the Central Division, Quinn Hughes to the Wild, which is very wild, which is a terrible joke now that I say it. But yeah, the Central Division is. I said at the beginning of the year that the Central Division was a division with six teams that could make the playoffs, only five can, and Quinn Hughes to the Wild makes things even more baffling or more competitive, because the Avalanche are on a torrid pace. The Stars seem to have gotten together after some early season struggles. The Mammoth are started strong and are tapering off. The Blackhawks are surprisingly good, which I'm not happy about. The Jets are tapering off from last year, which I had a feeling they were going to taper off. I wish the Blues would capitalize on that. But of course, the Blues are struggling. The Predators, oh yeah, and the Predators are bad, just like last year. So the Central Division, honestly, the Blues are going to have to take advantage of Utah and Chicago struggling if they're going to have any chance of getting to the playoffs. If I were to guess, the top three spots in the Central as of now would be Colorado, Minnesota, Dallas, and it's just the two wild cards. And the Blues would not only have to fight Utah and Chicago and maybe Winnipeg, but also the other teams in the Pacific, since the Kraken, if I'm not mistaken, are still on a good start. The Ducks came out of nowhere. The Golden Knights, I'm pretty sure the Golden Knights would be in the top three, and the Oilers just traded for Tristan Jarry, and the Sharks are finally. I think the rebuild for the Sharks might officially be nearing an end since they're pretty good this year as well. So the West is going to be tough this year, and if the Blues are going to have any chance of getting back to the playoffs, they're going to have to basically repeat the second half, but have it happen right now. Maybe a 13-game winning streak, who knows, or even more than that. But yeah, the Blues are going to need to have all hands on deck and have basically everything go their way. The goaltending needs to get Benner and Hofer need to get it together and be a rock solid tandem. The offense needs to start performing. Cam Feller needs to go back to second half form last year after signing that contract extension, and everyone needs to get healthy. So part of me thinks once everyone gets healthy again and it becomes consistent, this team will get back on track.
I just want to go back to the Hughes trade for a second. First of all, I'm not going to fall into the trap of prematurely declaring that one team won this trade. I'm just going to say, like, the Canucks have been criticized as this team that refuses to rebuild. Like, oh, they just want to retool and, like, you know, maybe salvage what they have. Honestly, getting rid of a guy like Quinn Hughes, I mean, granted, his contract was going to expire anyway, but, like, getting rid of, like, a guy that valuable, like one of the best defensemen in the league, I don't know, that kind of seems like a move that a team that's deliberately trying to rebuild would do. And it would make sense considering that they're sitting at last in the league right now. So at this point, what do they have to lose, right? I'm not going to prematurely declare who won. We're going to check back on this like in a few months just to see what's changed. And yeah, it's Minnesota of all teams. I did not expect that. I mean, we all knew him leaving the Canucks was pretty much inevitable, but Minnesota, always the team you least expect. I mean, at least they weren't on my radar anyway, but who knows? I think this is a sign of the times that the Canucks are probably finally committing to a rebuild, which is so out of character for them. And we'll see where this goes. But as far as the rest of the Western Conference standings, it's still like wide open. The Oilers are struggling so far. San Jose, they are finding their form. And as for the Anaheim Ducks and their surge, I think, you know, it's about time, to be honest. Like, their young forward core is finally starting to find their form. They're scoring a lot of goals. You know, they are definitely a team to be reckoned with. And for those of you who don't know, the Anaheim Ducks actually are my second favorite team, and they have been since 2015, so I am very happy to see their success. And honestly, like, looking at the standings right now, the Golden Knights and the Kings, they've kind of been overtime merchants so far. The Golden Knights have as many wins as losses, and the Kings have lost more games than they've won. I think the Ducks are the better team compared to those three. And if my Leafs don't get it together, I'm hoping the Ducks make a run for the Cup this year. It would be remarkable to see such a young team make a deep playoff run, but I think it's possible. And, you know, it's cool to see the NHL landscape changing so dramatically. It's cool to see the Mammoth, you know, finding form, and the Ducks surging, and the Sharks improving. And, you know, you have some juggernaut teams that are sort of falling back, like the Jets and the Oilers. So the scene's definitely shifting in the West. And meanwhile, in the East, I'm going to start by talking about my team, the Leafs. And I'm going to try to be brief about this because I've talked a lot in this episode already. I don't think the Leafs' struggles have anything to do with Mitch Marner getting traded. Okay? I'm just going to say, for the record, I have no animosity towards Mitch Marner. I wish him all the best in Vegas. But offensive production is not the Leafs' problems. It's not their biggest problem, okay? Like, I don't know if the people who say that even watch the sport. So, let's go to the league standings, right? I have the league standings on screen. The Leafs are 19th in the NHL. Not good. But if you sort by goals for, it's a completely different story. The Leafs are 11th in goals for. And a few days ago, they were 5th. So, scoring is not this team's issue, okay? Like, they have 99 goals for thus far. And then they're near teams like Detroit and Utah, who have 100 and 101, respectively. The Leafs are scoring as much as they have been. Nylander and Tavares have been the most consistent players on the team, which is great that we have, reliable players that contribute to our offensive production. It's just, generally, like, their defensive structure is all out of whack. And in a lot of games so far, they've been, like, getting outshot by outrageous margins. And the story has been the same as last year, largely, that they've been getting bailed out by great goaltending. But now you have Stolar's injured, Woll injured, Dennis Hildeby has had to pick up the slack, and he's been doing great, by the way. But yeah, I'm not worried about them scoring. It's just they need to figure things out on defense. I think using Berube as a scapegoat is lazy, and I don't think replacing him is going to make much of a difference overnight. The Leafs are on a bit of a point streak right now, which is good. They're trying to find their form. They've been showing signs of improvement, but like I said, we're not even halfway through December, so we'll see how things are shaping up in about a month from now.
Yeah, if you could pull up the stats to the Blues Maple Leafs game in November, I think that was, if I'm not mistaken, from what I've watched, that might have been the only game the Maple Leafs were not outshot, because the Blues have that problem where the problem is they'll be stuck in their zone for too much. They can't get the puck out. The opposing team gets way too many shots on, and because the Blues are tired and can't get a line changed, either they will take a stupid penalty or the opposing team will score, and it will keep happening. But I feel like with the Maple Leafs struggles, part of me feels like maybe they're just not the team for Craig Berube. Blues work because they don't really they didn't have a true elite super high-end talent superstar, but they were a team that was well balanced. The Leafs do have that high-end talent, but if I'm not mistaken, they don't have as much grit and tenacity. They do have veteran leadership, but it means nothing when you don't have the grit and tenacity made for the playoffs. And I feel like they are not the team made for Craig Berube. He still will have that he still has the pedigree from 2019 with the Blues, but the Blues and Maple Leafs are two different teams with two different philosophies and roster constructions.
I think that analysis is spot on. To answer your question from earlier, the shots on goal in the game were actually identical. It was 29-29. And going into this game, I just want to say straight up, I was not confident about the Leafs winning. I don't know what it is, but the Leafs are like cursed at home against the Blues. Like, I think there's something like 2-8 in their last 10 home games against the Blues, if I'm not mistaken. So going into this, they had lost 5 in a row. And also, it was talked about at the time that ticket prices had dipped, which is good, I guess. It's good for the wrong reasons. So I was not feeling comfortable, and we start off the game with an own goal. And thank goodness, Nylander was the hero in overtime with one of the greatest goals the Leafs have scored this season. Actually, I think it is the best goal the Leafs have scored all season. It was fantastic. And we beat a team that we've struggled to beat at home over the past decade. And then again, though, some of our more convincing wins have come against teams that are low down in the standings, which is not great. But the Leafs, like the Blues, have lots of time to find their form and find what's not working. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if they get rid of Berube, they might improve. I can't predict the future, and hockey is just a generally unpredictable sport. But I just don't like using one person as a scapegoat. And I think the problems with the Leafs thus far go beyond just Berube. But if the Leafs get rid of him, which for the record, I don't think they have any plans of doing right now, and they improve, then I will happily admit I was wrong. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like with the Maple Leafs, they might just be a team that's in a rut but needs just one moment to click and everything falls in line and they get back in the hunt. And if you could check the Atlantic Division, who's leading the Atlantic Division right now? 'Cause I know it's not Florida because they're having a bit of a rough hangover and are dealing with some injuries. I think
It's the
Ottawa's not.
Lightning.
Ooh, the Lightning. I said Soul Lightning were doing well. How's Ottawa doing?
Ottawa is struggling thus far. They are 14, 12, and 4. 32 points. They're third last in the East.
Okay, because the last I saw, the Senators were at one point the only Canadian team in a playoff spot. I know the Bruins are bouncing back from last year, which I definitely did not reverse jinx them in that rebrands video when I mentioned they were going to be terrible, but at least look good. Now they look good and are playing good, which, uh, eh, I, where are the Maple Leafs in the Atlantic Division right now?
They're fifth.
Okay, and where are they are they in a wild card spot, or how many points are they out of a wild card spot?
Right now, they're 2 points back of a wild card spot. They're 14, 11, and 5, so 33 points. And the Penguins are in the second wild card spot, and they have 35 points. But the Penguins do have a game in hand over the Maple Leafs. But it's pretty early to, say decisively who's a playoffs team and who isn't. It is interesting to note here that the Leafs are the only team in the East that's out of a playoff spot that has a positive goal differential, which just helps to prove my point that offensive production isn't the problem here. But yeah, so Montreal and New Jersey, who have also had good starts, have fallen out of a playoff spot, and the Leafs are behind them, and also the Rangers.
Yeah, I feel like the Maple Leafs. That's the thing. Also with the Blues is their last year when they were on that winning streak, their goal differential got better. It was something that killed them in 22-23 and 23-24. As their goal differential was god awful. It was always in the red. It got in the green in the second half of last year, and that's partly how they got into a playoff spot. Is they scored more goals, and the goalie tandem was rock solid. That's probably what they need, but you can't blame the goalies when the defense doesn't do their job and the offense vanishes. Yeah, I feel like maybe the Maple Leafs just need some motivational speech like in the movies and they go on a hot streak. Who knows?
Yeah, they could they could use a lot of motivational speeches, that's for sure. But I think that just about wraps up everything we've wanted to talk about in this episode. We've been recording for a long time.
Does it say how long we've been recording?
I can check real quick. Looks like we've been going for an hour and 18 minutes.
Well, I guess it's enough to make up for lost time, but it's good to be back, and hopefully we can record another episode or two in December and some more in January and February and so on. And hopefully we can get a more consistent schedule. I am off from school from now until January 20th. So I have a whole month and a half off. So I'm going to be making videos and I want to challenge myself to make more content in December and January. And hopefully I can accomplish that goal and continue on. I also want to try to switch over to a different video editing software. I've been wanting to go to DaVinci Resolve for a while, but I keep procrastinating and get cold feet. I have been using CapCut for about since the My rebrand, which is good but not sustainable. It's more for TikToks and Instagram reels, but not for YouTube videos. So hopefully I can both get on with the content grind and I can switch over to a different video editing software.
All right. Well, I'm sure that everyone's going to be looking forward to future episodes. I hope you guys are, anyways. I mean, I assume if you've watched to this point in the video, then at least you're a little bit interested in what we have to talk about, which is great. You know, every little bit of support helps. Obviously, we're on a new channel now. So, you know, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, help us gain more of a foothold. That would be a huge help to us.
And also let us know in the comments if you want us to do it both on YouTube and Spotify, and we'll figure out how we'll handle that.
Yeah, of course. Every little bit of feedback helps, so leave a comment. Leave any questions you have for us. We would love to read some of your comments on this show, answer any questions you might have. I might incorporate those into a future episode, who knows? But I think that'll just about take us to the end here.
All right, then we will see you guys in the next episode.